This is the podcast overview for week 13. We will be covering chapter 11, groups and individuals. So for this week, in addition to chapter 11, you're also reading article number 25, which is all about the Stanford prison study. And it's sort of speaking about what happened in the study, why it was important, and how it led to future developments really for the area of social psychology. This was a huge study, very greatly important in terms of laying some of the groundwork for studying group dynamics and group behavior and decision making. So that's the focus really for the discussion board this week. So let's take a look at your week. We've got the objectives here for the chapter. So again, I urge you to click into here and listen to the podcast where I go over each of these objectives. And it's good to do this before you start reading the chapter. That way you have a overview of the chapter and you kind of can know where to zone in on. Some of the stuff might sound familiar, especially if you recall any of the social psych stuff from when you took intro psych. This is like one of the, I would say, more popular areas of social psych, in addition to the chapter we did on conformity and obedience. This will probably be another big one. And we see some of the more seminal works in the field here. So please click on there and access the podcast that I did going over those. Your lecture slides for chapter 11 are here. And then here is the article reading for this week. And then I've put a variety of different videos. All are important. Again, you should be watching all of these videos. These are what I would be showing in class if we were meeting in person. And most of these this week are short, with the exception of the Stanford prison study, which I actually show the original study footage. And it's about, I think, 50 minutes long. So that's the longer one for this week. But all the other ones are really short. So I have a quick video on groupthink. It's kind of like an introduction to the concept. What is groupthink? How does it happen? What domains do we see this occur in the most? And why is it considered a negative thing? We don't typically think of groupthink as something positive. It has a lot of negative ramifications and consequences. So this will give you a good introduction of that. And this is a very short clip on a scene from the movie 12 Angry Men. This is the original film. This movie has been redone, so there's a newer version of this film, but this is the original footage, and it really showcases nicely the effects of groupthink, which can happen most commonly within jury service when you have a bunch of jurors debating and deliberating a case. It can get one-sided, and so this kind of covers the dynamics of that and how that might play a role. Then I have a video on conformity and groupthink. This is the same video that I posted earlier in the semester when we were talking about conformity. So you're going to recall at least the beginning if you watched it last time. That should be familiar to you, but I want you to zone in on not just the conformity part, because now you have a good grasp of that, but how conformity relates to groupthink. How conformity is actually a nice segue into how groupthink can occur and why it does. So make sure that you take a look at that. And then I have a video on social loafing. I actually have a couple different videos on social loafing. They're both short, and I like each one differently for various reasons, but this shows the Ringelmann effect, aka social loafing, what happens in a little demonstration of tug-of-war to demonstrate this idea of social loafing, like what are the consequences of it. And this kind of walks you through the concept of social loafing and what they call the free rider effect. Now, this isn't something that's in your textbook, so I'm not going to hold you to that term, but I like the video and how it describes social loafing. And then this is a video on diffusion of responsibility. This is a topic we've covered when we talked about pro-social behavior. We talked a little bit about diffusion of responsibility, but it comes into play again, definitely in group dynamics for sure. And so this video, it has no sound, and it's somebody just kind of doing their own little social experiment. But you can watch and see what happens and how people react in the video and how that shows this diffusion of responsibility. And then here is the original Stanford prison study documentary, the original footage with Phil Zimbardo. And so it's really compelling, but he basically walks you through his study and takes you back through the footage of what happened and why they actually had to end the experiment early because of what was happening that they did not predict or expect. And then lastly, I have a video here that is kind of like a modern day version of the Stanford prison experiment. It talks about Abu Ghraib, which is a military prison, and some instances occurred there that kind of mirror what happened in the Stanford prison study, where you have guards and prisoners. Those roles become very embedded within one's identity and can be not a good mix of elements there and how it went really bad. And so talks a little bit about that and some other aspects of just being in uniform. So what we learned from the Stanford prison study is just putting on a prisoner's outfitting or a guard's outfitting. It's a role you start to conform to and that can take over, and that can be very powerful. So I'll have you watch that and kind of compare to the Stanford prison study. Okay, and then you have week 13 discussion, where I want you really integrating the chapter as well as the article and the videos this week. So you're doing all of that. After watching the video on the Stanford prison study and the Abu Ghraib video, I want you to use that. And I also posted just the Wikipedia site where you can find out more about Abu Ghraib. I want you to use all that and briefly summarize the events that took place at Abu Ghraib. What were they? What happened? And then explain how the events at Abu Ghraib mirrored those that took place in the experimental study, the Stanford prison study. And I want you thinking here about roles, playing those roles, compliance, complying with a direct request, and then obedience to authority, as well as aggression. So these are all topics we've been talking about in the last couple weeks. I really want to see a nice representation of you integrating in what you've learned into answering this question. And then lastly, could anyone, including you, be induced to act in the same way as the prisoners or guards if you were put in the same situation as the Stanford prison study? If you were in that situation, do you think that you could do the same? And I want you to think in terms of what the research says about the power of the situation and then the lessons learned from the Stanford Prison Study. So be paying attention closely to Dr. Zimbardo when he talks about the study in that original Stanford Prison Study footage. He will explain what he was thinking and what was going through his mind as a researcher, watching what was unfolding in front of his eyes in the mock prison setting. And I want you to think about how the role of the guard really differed from the role of the prisoner, how those differed, and how powerful the situation and those roles were. Okay, and that wraps up the week. As you're working through the material, if you need any help on the concepts or have any questions, please let me know.